Hey, I'm Osman Faruqi, and this is The Drop, a culture show from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, where we dive into the latest in the world of pop culture and entertainment. I'm here with Thomas Mitchell and Mel Kembry. How you going, guys? You excited about Madam Web, the Sony Pictures Spider-Man spin-off starring Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney?
Well, the thing is, if I was to cast my dream movie, it would star Sydney Sweeney and Dakota Johnson.
That's actually so true.
And myself. Yeah, but sadly, I don't think it would be as bad as Madam Web appears to be. I saw a very funny review only moments ago from someone that was like, I've never been so embarrassed for a movie in my whole entire life, embarrassed for the people involved, embarrassed for myself for watching it. It looks like Marvel's greatest stinker.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate timing, isn't it, when everyone's off Marvel and Marvel is hitting kind of the low point of its trajectory to have these two great actresses in it and it to not work.
Yeah, it is sad. I think it's really funny going back to read the interviews with Dakota and Sydney when they signed on. They thought they were like entering the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think they didn't realize that they're in the weird Sony Spider-Man verse where they're not allowed to like mention Spider-Man's name. They've got the rights to like secondary Spider-Man characters, Morbius and Spider Madam Web, Spider-Woman, whatever it is. But the thing that I'm the most annoyed about, I don't know if you guys remember this from when the trailer of this film was released a few months ago. This one line went viral because it was just insane. Is this like dialogue from Dakota Johnson where she says, he was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died. Like that became a meme because of how insane that is. That sentence in full does not exist in the film. It was like stitched together from like her saying different bits and pieces. And I feel like so many people wanted to see the movie knowing that it was a train wreck because of this meme, and they're going to be really let down and disappointed and sad.
So you've seen it.
I have not seen it, and I don't know if I will. I'm sorry to anyone who works at Sony Pictures listening to this podcast, but I gotta triage my time, man. I can't do the bad ones.
It's funny though, because I feel like everyone collectively agreed that the movie was bad before it came out. It was obviously going to be a piece of shit, but then like watching them on the like publicity circuit having to promote the film, it's like you really feel for Dakota Johnson. She's a good actress, and she's just been like,
yeah, she clearly was not
like
feeling
kind of
it on the publicity tour. Yeah,
no.
And I also feel like post 50 Shades of Grey, she's kind of done some more interesting, like The Lost Daughter was a very interesting film, more interesting roles, that one that we liked, Cha-Cha Smooth.
Yeah.
And then to kind of come back into the blockbuster with something like this. I
hope she's getting that bag at least. Like I hope her and Sydney are getting
100%.
a lot of cash. I'm very happy for them. They looked great on the red carpet last night. Very happy
they
for them. Look, the point of today's episode is not to go deep on Madam Web. Don't worry. We're going to be talking predominantly about Australia's national cultural obsession with reality TV and this kind of take that I've been developing about how it's become, I think, kind of our most significant cultural export. We're going to dive into how exactly that came to be, whether it's good or bad or a little bit of both for the Australian entertainment industry. And we will, of course, have our regular Impress Your Friends recommendation segment at the end of the show as well. But before we get to those, we're a couple of days on from the Super Bowl. Have you guys recovered? Were you guys Chiefs fans? I don't really know who you were barracking for.
I think I was going for the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, wanted him to get his one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But I was also obviously very invested in the off-the-field drama, and that's what I was really there for. The Super Bowl ads, the kind of announcements that took place during them, the celebrities in the crowd, the halftime show, obviously our main girl, Taylor, turning up.
She definitely did turn up. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really care less about the actual football. I was glad that the Kansas City Chiefs won because that seemed to be like the storyline everyone was hoping would happen.
The storyline that the deep state had implanted in the American, psyche. Yeah,
I mean, also it's worth shouting out just how crazy but hilarious it was that Joe Biden tweeted a picture of himself with the demonic eyes being like, we did it. Like, it's just
how
we're
we
living in the
planned
Matrix now, guys. Yeah. I think I live blogged it and obviously wrote a kind of wrap up on the halftime show. I think the halftime show is a really interesting kind of, performance segment and opportunity for people in the entertainment industry, and it offers this really strange, unique cultural moment. And every year it's like a talked about thing, as we all know. And obviously Usher did it this year, and obviously it was bad. Usher, baby. Let's go. Up in the club with my, trying to get a little keep it down in the low key.
'Cause you know how it is.
I completely disagree with this
Yeah,
take.
I was going to say, is that widely agreed that it's bad? Like, you and I were talking about this as it was happening, and you were just completely off it. And I thought there was a lot more positivity around it generally from other people.
Yeah, I know. Like, I mean, I obviously did think it was bad. I do think that the predominant feeling around it was like one of being underwhelmed. But then I would say I went into it with low expectations. I always thought Usher was an odd choice. He doesn't really, for me, have the like. Not only like he's not obviously not that relevant now, he's a nostalgia act, but like even back then, I don't think he's big enough to like anchor a Super Bowl halftime show alone. Maybe if he had brought out some guests, some more guests. But yeah, and then I thought the performance itself was like slick and everything. It looked good and he sounded fine, but it was just underwhelming.
Man, I don't get what was not to like about this show. I also had quite low expectations because Usher, he does have a new album out, which was kind of why he's done this. But
Name
no one's
one song
listened
off
to
the
that.
album,
No,
yeah.
agree. But I had quite low expectations. But there he was, dancing, a big brass band, shirts off, great cameo features by people, and then there was the roller skating. I don't know what was underwhelming about this show.
But like that's what I mean. Like so, the Super Bowl is like synonymous now with moments. The moment from the okay, maybe there was two moments. Him with his shirt off and he's like got a good rig for 45, and him on roller skates. Like that's fucking so lame.
That's two moments, not one moment.
I think there
I'm
are
not
more
saying that
moments,
this is top 10.
but I think they had nothing to do with Usher. Like, I think Alicia Keys coming out was like pretty fun. I thought Little John was like my highlight, like particularly because before, like, Little John and Usher have obviously a huge iconic song that closed out the show, but he just got Little John to do "Turn Down for What" for like 30 seconds. That was pretty cool. And then Ludacris looking like Ludacris, really, it looked so silly. that was also fun. But I kind of agree with Thomas. Like, it was like sort of interesting, but it didn't feel like it made the most of the spectacle that a Super Bowl halftime show could be. We know that Usher's just been finishing up his long-term Vegas residency, and it sort of did feel he'd just taken that stage show and put it on the Super Bowl and maybe not gone for anything a bit more like wacky and intense.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to stand the test of time as one of the best Super Bowl shows, of course. But I thought it was better than I expected. And I thought her on the guitar was really good.
Yeah, but like that's what I mean. It's like better than I expected, and it was okay. Like it was all fine. But like when we do like next year, inevitably when we like roll into the Super Bowl again and be like the 10 best, it's never going to be on the list of like memorable ones. You know what I mean?
Agree. Also, I think I have like a nostalgia because at our school, we were a public school and we were obviously not good at sport. And so for sport days, we used to be able to do these like insane sports, and one of them was Skate Plus. Like we'd just go roller skating, and because it was that time, I just remember going to Skate Plus, going round and round to like Burn and Confessions. So when he came out on the roller skates, it really like there was a lot of nostalgic feels going on there.
It is interesting how many other cultural moments overshadowed Usher. Like, I think you mentioned Taylor Swift, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I also think one of the ones that maybe didn't seem like it at the time, but has had a bit of staying power is the Dunkin' Donuts commercial with Ben Affleck and Damon. Like, that was probably the best ad of the show for me.
Yeah, I thought that was a very funny ad. I just love like the friendship of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon so much. Like I think I want a friendship like that for myself one day. Neither of you agree.
Wow,
Suggesting
okay.
that the three of us are not that friendship.
No, but they're just so funny. And then, like, as they're walking off together, and he's like, I'd say I'd do anything for you. Like, this is anything. Those guys, they're great.
And J-Lo getting in on it too. Was
yeah, and
quite
then Tom
fun.
Brady. It's like, man, nothing but the hits.
Though I didn't think he was looking great. Being off the field hasn't. I don't know. I reckon he's struggling without his game.
Yeah, that's fair.
And look, Taylor Swift was probably the single biggest draw of the event. Like, that was probably as many people watching the show for her as they were for the actual NFL, if not more. She arrived with her entourage of like Blake Lively, but sans Ryan Reynolds, which I thought was interesting because Ryan Reynolds' trailer for Deadpool 3 was like a big part of the Super Bowl too, but it was not really clear where he was. She also rocked up with Ice Spice, who I made a joke about being at the Grammys last week. So now I guess I'm wrong. And when Ice Spice does die in 50 years, there's going to be a Taylor Swift organized tribute for it. And then she also brought up Lana Del Rey to hang out as well. I mean, she was doing a lot in this, like the usual kind of cheering, but also she like sculled a drink for the camera when it was on her at some point. We talked about Taylor fatigue last week. I'm interested in how we feel about it now. A bit of a check-in, given that since then we've had the Super Bowl stuff and we're like 2 or 3 days away from her actual shows in this country. How's the Taylor fatigue-o-meter going?
Look, the fatigue meter. I think that I watched this and I was kind of like, let the girl live. Let her have a good time.
Shocking response
Drinking
from
her
you.
drinks.
Mel, you've
hanging
already
out
got
with
your
her
tickets
friends.
sorted, all right? You don't have to suck up anymore.
Yeah. Universal are taking you.
She knows that everyone is going to criticize her for everything. And I don't know. I just thought it was fine. And she didn't annoy me at all. And then I've been watching all the TikToks come out from the after party. Her and Travis Kelce just like
Dancing to Love
having
Story.
a great time together. Her holding a one drink in her hand with her other hand around him. And I don't know. I don't think we need to be miserly. I obviously still think Taylor is fair game for criticism. But I don't know. I'm fine with her being there. The only thing I will say was, and maybe this was just when they were cutting to her, I thought she didn't look as tense as I would probably look if my partner was in such a kind of intense game and moment. Like, she was always having fun and there was so much hugging and laughing and happiness. And then they would cut to Brittany Mahomes and she was looking dead serious,
She was in
like
it.
not happy at all. So I thought maybe Taylor just needed to save the celebrations for after Travis kind
That
of
is
won.
interesting.
Yeah, especially given he was like,
What about you, Thomas? Do you dare speak up in case the Swifties come after you?
Well, I mean, I do think my fatigue meter has maxed up until next Friday when I too attend the show, which I'm very excited about, thanks to our friends at Universal. But I think that, no, I do, look, I do actually feel for her because, we're one day out from her starting this enormous sold-out tour that everyone in the country has been talking about ad nauseum forever. But on top of that, she just, stole the show at the biggest sporting spectacle in the world. It's pretty insane overexposure, and it's, not her fault. But, I just think any normal person is a bit like, can we please stop talking about Taylor Swift for a bit? But that's not her fault. I think, it was interesting to watch that whole thing. I was actually more interested in the actual fallout from the Travis Kelce stuff and watching how the internet Swifties kind of maybe turned on him. His storyline has taken a real turn now. People are like, ooh, he's a red flag guy.
Yeah, because of that moment where he was sort of shouting at the coach.
Yeah, and he did the weird Viva Las Vegas thing, which people weren't into. He just seemed a bit like, I think the Swifties were like, some brand damage for us now with Travis.
Yeah, there was this viral moment going around. It's like you can pinpoint the moment where she gets the ick. And I'm like, look, again, I think that's kind of unhinged, right?
Crazy.
You're trying to diagnose someone's feelings about their partner based on a reaction to a random thing. Who knows? I don't want to get into the politics of it or whatever, but it is completely absurd to me, this discourse playing out in America where the right and the far right anti the Kansas City Chiefs and the NFL and Taylor Swift. It's these things are the most traditionally small case C conservative coded cultural institutions in the world, and you're they're all left-wing crazy pro Biden. We're alienating ourselves from them just because Taylor Swift has started going to games to hang out with and support her boyfriend. It's completely unhinged.
My favorite thing we'll leave with this. My favorite thing was watching the after party scenes, and it's Travis and Taylor dancing, and they just pan across to what's his crazy brother's name?
Oh my God, Jason Kelce.
And he's behind the DJ wearing a horse head, got 2 beers.
He was the party.
Yeah, I'm that's where it's at.
So on to the biggest announcement of the night, at least from my perspective, in an ad for Verizon that played during the game. Beyonce dropped a little hint at the end of that ad that she had new music on the way, and then very quickly we got the new music and we got the announce. It was Act 2 of Renaissance, her album from a couple of years ago. It's coming in March, and she dropped 2 very, very heavily country-leaning tracks.
This ain't Texas, ain't no hold'em. So lay your cards down, 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 down. So pocket leg.
Texas Hold'em and 16 Carriages. I got one phrase for you guys. Yeehaw. Here we go. We got Beyonce country albums. We got a Lana Del Rey country album. We country heads are eaten. We were onto this from last year, Thomas. We were saying the country renaissance is here. Everyone's pivoting. We're getting in early. I'm very excited about this. What do you guys think of these new Beyonce tracks?
And literally, it is the country renaissance because it's Renaissance Part 2, right?
Wow.
Oh, bang. She's good.
She's quick. Look, even us non-country heads are excited about this because if anyone could make me like country music, it's probably Beyonce. I think, yeah, and she did spell out that kind of she was going to tackle different genres through her Renaissance album. So I think this is an interesting move. And then I really like the first song they dropped, Texas Hold'em.
Texas Hold'em, great song, I reckon.
Oh my gosh, catchy, that banjo, the kind of stomp clap of it. I thought it's a very catchy song, and obviously I think this is the regeneration that the country genre needs.
Yeah, I think it's just nice to have confirmation again, Osman, that you and I are like just ahead of the curve and we know what's coming, and we've been blazing these trails, and it's just good to learn that again.
I mean, I've been wanting more of this from Beyonce since Daddy Lessons on Lemonade. Like, that is one of my favorite songs on that track that is like out and out country, and there's been this kind of like Daddy Lessons hive that is like, let's go. So all the Daddy Lesson fans were really jumping out of their seats.
And that was rejected by the Grammys as a country song when it first came out. They wouldn't
Well, this is the other part of this, right? This goes back to like Lil Nas X and Old Town Road when the recording industry, the Billboard charts wouldn't let that be classified as country, and then Billy Ray Cyrus was like, this is completely outrageous, and jumped on and said, now it's a country song. And it's already happening. There's these stories and reports of Beyonce fans trying to get country radio stations to play Texas Hold'em and 16 Carriages, and they're like, we don't play Beyonce, we're a country station. So I think we're about to have a very big conversation about black art and culture and country, and how these two things will combine, all in the lead up to a presidential election contested between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So I'm sure it's going to be very sane and a very normal conversation that America has as a result of this record. But as much as I'm a little bit frustrated by it, I honestly cannot wait to talk about it, because it's the shit that gets me going.
I was going to say, there's going to be some long nights in the Take Factory for Osman, just cooking up, just working away, a pinch of this, a dash of that, and then...
You'll see me going live on Instagram at like 10 p.m. a lot with a bottle of wine.
It is funny though that we're going to have, so now Beyonce new album in March, Taylor new album in April, and then Dua Lipa has got a new album coming too.
Grande.
And Ariana Grande. Like that's huge year of new music from some of the biggest like trends.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm sure we will talk about it when we get to hear those records.
Hi, I'm Samantha Salinger-Morris. I'm here because I want to let you know that at The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, we've just relaunched our daily news podcast. It's now called The Morning Edition, and I'm your host. In every episode, we unpack the biggest stories of the day with the best journalists in the country. Like Nick McKenzie, who broke the story about Ben Roberts-Smith, the war hero turned war criminal.
Now, what was going on from day dot, it was about intimidation and shutting us up and saying, you come after Ben Roberts-Smith, he'll come after you.
And Kate McClymond, whose investigations are synonymous with some of the biggest scandals and stories in Australian public life.
When Eddie Obeid finally went to jail, I can remember being in the newsroom at the Herald, and I actually burst into tears.
The Morning Edition will take you beyond the headlines, bringing you the story behind the story. You can find it by searching for The Morning Edition in your podcast app of choice. New episodes will be in your feed every weekday morning.
All right, let's talk reality television. We already know that it's big all over the world, and it has been for a while. Franchises like The Real Housewives, Vanderpump Rules, Survivor, My Precious Traitors, they're some of the biggest shows in the world and have been for years. But the genre seems to be particularly popular here in Australia. For the last few years, the way that the TV calendar has worked is that we come back from the summer break, the ratings season officially begins, and all the main networks go out with their big flagship reality programs. You've got 10 Survivor, 7's Australian Idol, 9, which we should point out is the company that owns the newspapers that we work at. They've got Married at First Sight, the kind of big ratings juggernaut. And outside of news and current affairs programming, these shows dominate the ratings. Like, they are the most watched shows day in, day out, week in, week out, throughout the year in Australia. And the only other shows that have come close so far this year to competing with those big traditional reality formats are the ABC's Muster Dogs, which I don't know if you guys have seen, but people really love Muster Dogs.
I have. Have you watched it? It's adorable.
I also haven't watched it, but like, people love this show, and it is basically a reality show. Like, it's an ABC version of a reality show about these working dogs. I was told to not refer to them as cattle dogs, because that's not giving them their due, because some of them also do sheepdog mustering. So they're working dogs. That is the, I believe, woke and PC term for these animals, kind of competing to be the best one. That's basically a reality show. And then the other show that's rated well so far this year is also an ABC one, their big budget political series about the last kind of 10 years of Liberal governments, called Nemesis. I mean, that's also basically a reality show. And it's so similar that one of our colleagues, Jackie Maley, wrote a column comparing it to The Real Housewives of Canberra. And if it's not traditional reality in that it's competition, I think that style of like the diary format and like just rehashing these dramatic moments, it seems inspired by the direction that reality has gone down in the last couple of years. I guess a lot of this might not be shocking to people, considering people listening to this probably watch these shows and they're like, yeah, I know that they're popular. But I think there is another part to this conversation as well. And this came up in a conversation I was having with our colleague Meg, who just, by the by, she's been on parental leave, which is why she's not really been writing for us lately, but she popped into the office this morning with her beautiful twins, Sophie and Max. That was very fun. It's been a very good mood. Her and I were texting the other day about Australian reality TV and talking about how there's been this growing acknowledgement overseas for the last few years that Australian reality TV is being very, very warmly received by international audiences, particularly in the United Kingdom and the US. Last year's season of Survivor Australia is widely considered to be one of the best ever. The first season of Traders is going ballistic in America right now, and MAFS has been shocking and delighting people all over the world for a couple of years. I think it went really big in the pandemic. So I guess the question that I want to talk to you guys about in this episode is, how did Australia become a reality TV powerhouse, and what does it mean for our cultural production and output more generally? Mel, maybe I'll ask you first. Like, how do you feel and what do you think about our obsession with reality in this country?
Well, I mean, I don't think it is. I do think it is a global phenomenon, the kind of reality TV interest. And I do kind of think it probably has hit a peak in a way. Like, I think there was this huge oversaturation when all of the streamers had about 15 of their own reality TV shows. So I do think we are paring back a bit from that. In terms of like the global relevance of the Australian shows, I guess I kind of think there's a taste of the exotic, which might be why we're attracting such large audiences overseas. It's the spiders and the kind of creatures we have here. It's the beaches that we have here. It's the kind of sense of the other, I think, that might be responsible for the kind of global audience that we're drawing on here.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also an element of like, Australia's funny because like, when you look at reality TV as a concept, I think lots of people generally accept that the explosion of it like kind of began in like 2000 with Survivor. Like that original Survivor season with like, remember Richard? And it was like, that kind of birthed this like phenomenon that we now know. And Australia was like really quick to jump on the train. Like the next year we had Big Brother, the first season of which was like a cultural phenomenon here with, like Sarah Marie and the bum dance and all those like kind of characters. And then the next year we had Australian Idol. These are, finales that are watched by millions and millions of people. So I think what happens here is like we jumped on to the trend really quick. And as often happens with Australia, because we are so like far away and isolated, we jump onto a trend, we watch how it operates in the countries, overseas like America and the UK. And then once we start to do it ourselves, we almost feel this like internal need to make it more outrageous, to lift it even further, to go above and beyond in order to like make it our own. And so it's almost like we've taken on the reality TV like rules and formats and then just like fucking turbocharge them. And this is what's happened so consistently with our formats then selling back overseas, because like they make MAFS in America, they make MAFS in the UK, but they don't rate anywhere near as high as the MAFS Australian season, because like the characters we have and also like slight tweaks to the format have like, and this is a word I hear a lot talked about Australian MAFS, like turbocharge. Like we have just got this culture where we need to almost like, there is that kind of cultural inferiority thing where we need to prove ourselves by going to like this insane level.
Yeah, it almost sounds Darwinian hearing you talk about it that way. It's like when a creature kind of stumbles into a different, maybe slightly inhospitable environment, it has to kind of adapt to reflect the conditions around it, and that changes, like it loses its feathers and grows scales or something instead. And I feel like that sounds like what you think Australian reality TV is good at doing. Interesting, Mel, you talking about the exotic nature of like Australia as a setting and also as like Australians as characters. I always find it really funny that British I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is filmed and set in Byron Bay. It's just like, why does anyone want to leave there? But I guess for British people, it's like, well, this is sort of outlandish and funny. It's like how we call our version, it's in the jungles of Africa when it's in this, national park in South Africa. Like, it's totally fine, really.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Also, I do think, though, while we love reality TV here, I think overseas reality TV stars make the bridge from TV to the rest of the world celebrity more than they do here. Like, if I think about some of the people who have started in reality TV and are now kind of figures of celebrity wealth and power overseas, like, you know, Donald Trump, reality TV star to president, Kim Kardashian, reality TV star to billionaire mogul, and as well as all her family. Even like Emma Stone started out on reality TV and is now an Oscar-winning actress, or soon to be. Harry Styles on the talent shows. I feel like our reality TV stars make the jump into kind of fame beyond reality TV less than they do overseas.
Yeah, I think so. I guess, and it's also, I mean, the fact that reality TV is so like prevalent now, there's just like the talent pool has diminished, and then people like you're lucky if you come off and get like a good podcast, or maybe you make some money on OnlyFans. Like the days of Chrissy Swans and Fitzy and, you know, those types of people getting like genuine media careers, with the exception probably of like an Abby Chatfield. That doesn't really happen anymore, I think, because of like a bit of a fatigue on the media's part with like the talent that comes out. But I think more generally though, like just looking at the way, like, and I think it's, you know, obviously, as we said, MAFS is a Channel 9 show, and, you know, that's the company that we work for, but it also is the absolute biggest reality TV show in the country right now. And I think that is a really interesting like example of what happens when a reality show format is just like honed. It's at the amount of seasons now where maybe other shows are taper off. And it's not, because it's just been like honed and tweaked. Every season they like tweak the challenges. Like Mel and I are watching it this season, we're both addicted, but they've like added a few extra challenges that are so crazy. But like every year you like, it just like, it keeps holding, like it keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Well, I want to talk about that, and this seems like a good time to do it. It's like, what are the changes that we've made? So there's a few other bits and pieces to it we can get to, and I think there's a part of like just hearing Australians is interesting for international people, and locations are interesting for international audience. But something like MAFS, that's massive in Australia as well as kind of resonating elsewhere. What is it about the show, and maybe talking about this season is a good frame for that? I'm actually not watching this season religiously. I've watched like a lot of the other ones, but I'm just doing other things at the moment. But you guys are not missing a single minute of this. So what is it about MAFS that has made it this turbocharged juggernaut?
I think it is. We talk about water cooler TV a lot. And I think actually what is successful about MAFS is why we also love a show like Succession or The White Lotus. It's the talkability of the show. There are all these points that you can discuss while you're watching it. Like, I'm pretty much the director's commentary turned on
Same.
when I'm watching it. Like, me and my partner are just constantly analysing, being the experts, offering advice. We just talk the entire way through it. And then obviously you talk to people who are watching it separately, and there are so many talking points, because I think it does manage to put its finger on questions of power in relationships, questions of gender, even questions of ethics about the show itself. There's just a lot of entry points into a show that is seemingly quite shallow, but you can have quite serious conversations about what is going on in the show.
Yeah, it's a show that like kind of like thrives off its interaction. But in terms of actually like the cold hard changes, they have been very smart. Like if you go back and watch MAFS season 1, and I think we've written about this before, it feels more like an SBS fly on the wall documentary show about, you know, relationships and you know what happens when you try and match two strangers who seemingly are made for each other, compared to what it is now, which is like an experiment that is like an experiment designed to cause chaos and give the best TV. And that like was purposefully done. So like season 1, you kind of got this SBS thing. Season 3, they introduced dinner parties. So dinner parties are like a once episode week where they get all of the couples together and they ply them with alcohol, or like, you know, alcohol is free flowing, and everyone kind of just like goes through their grievances of the week. It's actually kind of like a family dinner in the most traditional sense, but it's like crazy. And this is where people like, you know, you get the dominant personality speaking up, you get everyone like comparing themselves to other relationships. And that was like a masterstroke. On top of that, we've had stuff like the honesty box. And like the amazing thing about MAFS is that they've got these experts which have become very popular, and they have to try and justify these really, really like insane like additions to the show that are clearly made just to produce good TV, but they have to try and like frame them as productive things for the relationship. So you've got Honesty Box where like, you know, they have to answer a bunch of questions about each other that are clearly designed to like poke and prod at the very obvious problems in the relationship. And then this, or maybe last season, they introduced like the trust exercise, which we've seen a lot of drama around this season, which is like you give your phone to your partner so they can go through it. And obviously, like, you know, that is something that is just designed for TV purposes. And what I think is interesting about all this is that, like, you know, I was reading a Reddit thread yesterday that was like, why is Australian maths so much better than American maths? And all of the Americans are like, because we don't have this. They don't have dinner parties. They don't have the confessions box.
That's really interesting.
They don't have
really interesting.
Like the other one, the photo ranking challenge, where the contestants have to go through every other, contestant in the show and rank them in order of attractiveness, including their own partner. And like these are just like, you know, when you're watching
that's insane, but also genius.
But then I don't know, like I feel like I don't quite know how to justify morally my participation in this system. Like I watch Muster Dogs and I feel happy, and I watch maths and I don't know, because I do think that it leans into promoting stereotypes about people and relationships. And like in this season in particular, there's something going on with men apparently being unable to show affection and to be intimate, and women demanding affection and intimacy. And I don't know, I do think it does play into stereo lines and stereotypes about gender roles and gender relations in a way that is digestible, but is also potentially quite harmful.
Yeah, I've always found that bit interesting because I've sort of had a different take on that, which is that I think a lot of people find maths confronting because the kinds of relationship types modeled on the show are not ones that they experience themselves and not ones that they're familiar with, but they are ones that exist and maybe exist very commonly across all different stratas of Australian society. So it feels odd to see that. It's like, well, that's not how I have experienced dating in my social network, in my, socioeconomic bubble or whatever. I'm sorry, this is not aimed directly at you, Mel. I'm just talking generally.
No, I have quite healthy
criticisms of the show. And I think one thing that I do think maths has done, and I think I've written about this before, is it's forced people to observe those dynamics, even the unhealthy ones, and then talk about them kind of as a community or as a society about why they are bad, and normalized, I think, a lot of people who maybe are not learning about what good masculine versus bad masculine behavior is, or what is gaslighting, or what is a man who is being unhealthy versus being just a little bit jealous. I think it's probably forced a lot of people to have conversations around that. I remain skeptical of the idea that people watch maths and see bad behavior and are like, I'm going to emulate that. I could be totally wrong. Like, I think that's just my knee-jerk sort of response to these criticisms that showing something that's violent or bad makes people want to do it. I think there's more merit in putting a spotlight on it and acknowledging that this is how people play out. Of course, the caveat around all of this is, like, maths is not a government-produced, like, social services program. It is a reality TV show where a lot of tweaks that are made are for the purpose of entertainment and making us, like, watch people have drama and fight. And, like, that part of it is obviously not about helping people have great relationships in their home life, but I do think that could be and is a big part of the show.
Yeah, but I just think it is funny when you zoom out that, like, we are, it's easy to have like this view of, we're sitting here in Australia talking about how great Australian maths is and, made by the greatest TV channel in the world. But the thing is, like, when you do zoom out, like, America and the UK are traditionally, like, they are like the creators of, like, reality TV and, like, the biggest reality TV shows, and yet they are still, like, consuming stuff like maths and stuff like even MKR, My Kitchen Rules, when that was, like, a really strong format. That was an Australian format that then sold to the UK and went all over the world. So, like, we have reached this particular point with our production of reality TV formats where even the countries that traditionally produce way more reality TV than us are, like, really, really into what our product is.
Yeah, my other thought about why we've become so adept at refining and emulating and perfecting these formats is actually like a structural one. Like, it goes to what we make in this country and why we make it. And there's a bit of this conversation that, like, might sound boring because it has to do with numbers. So just please bear with me. And Thomas and Mel, if you find a way to make it more exciting, please jump in. But basically, the short version is, like, we are a small country, right, that is never going to be able to compete against enormous markets like the US and Europe. So the government basically says that there should be rules that force TV networks to create Australian shows rather than just like pumping, different versions of NCIS and CSI on networks all the time. And the rule at the moment, the regulation is that commercial networks have to make sure that 55% of programming between 6 p.m. and midnight is Australian TV, right? There used to be rules within that said that a set proportion of that had to be documentaries and children's shows and drama, right? And a lot of Australian drama that we grew up watching from the 90s and 2000s, even into the 2010s, was a result of networks basically being forced to invest in it and make it. Those subquotas were abolished during COVID. They have slowly been like weakened. And at the moment, it's like, I won't get into the details of it, but there's like a complicated point system. But the wash up is basically, there is no hard and fast rule that says a certain number of drama needs to be produced by commercial networks. They've turned instead to reality. And it's become the thing that if you want to survive in this country, even if you're SBS or the ABC, you have to make really, really great reality. And so it's kind of become our main like form of TV cultural production. America's known for like, I guess, reality, but also prestige dramas. The British have got crime dramas. The Northern Europeans have got Scandi noir. And like, we've got really good seasons of Maths, really good seasons of Survivor, really good seasons of Traitors. I think there is like a structural reason to it. And maybe partly why overseas audiences resonate so well is that the first time they're probably seeing Australians interact and talk about their lives isn't in a great Australian drama. It's in an Australian reality show. They're like, oh yeah, I don't know what the Aussies are up to. I haven't seen a great Aussie film or a great Aussie show for like 15 years, but here's a bunch of them frolicking around in Ireland. Let's find out what's going on down under. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I do think, obviously, the quota conversation is one that is ongoing in Australia. But I do think it is a real issue that reality TV is what all our free-to-air broadcasters are largely investing in. And when you go to the upfronts, which is what happens every year when all the broadcasters tell you what they've got on their slate for the year, you feel like they are throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, because every year there are new reality shows that will last for one season and then completely disappear, as well as the staples. And I do think it is a problem in a country which doesn't have, as we've talked about before, funding of the arts to allow kind of new shows and dramas to be created, which means that profit-driven broadcasters are trying to find market comparison points, like this is the next Maths, this is the next Survivor, to make kind of their ends meet. And I think it's probably why you're seeing some of the most interesting Australian shows like Bump and Heartbreak High. They're being produced by the streamers rather than being on free to air. And I think it is kind of a structural issue that I don't know is necessarily great for Australian film and television production.
100%. And like, these kind of like, these shows are typically cheaper to make, and I think it's even more interesting that we're seeing less of like the shiny, show format as they used to kind of call it, like the Australian Idols, The Voice, the MKRs. Like MKR is gone now. That used to be the dominant reality, and now you've got Maths, and so like our attention has shifted to that type of thing. But you're completely right. Like I remember being at the Channel 7 upfront for 2023, and they had the series Blow Up, where people were competing to make the best balloon artwork, and I was like, this is it. This is like, it was hosted by Stephen Curry and Becky Lucas. Like this is, we have hit the rock bottom of like reality TV when Blow Up is getting commissioned, and you can imagine.
Didn't they get a Logie? Wasn't it like nominated for a Logie or something weird like that?
I mean, we all know how I feel about that.
Yeah, play our Logies episode.
But like that was a show, and this is a perfect example of like that was a one season show. I think after the first episode, everyone was like, "This is never coming back to TV." But it was like, that's a show that's actually getting made and money's getting put into that because it could possibly work, and that's an experiment they're willing to, like, they'll roll the dice on that. But you imagine the amount of like dramas that have passed over, like not even getting to see the light of day. It is kind of depressing, and luckily we do have streamers kind of stepping in now, but yeah.
I think the other part to this is one of the big shows we've not mentioned yet is The Block, which is also a Channel 9 show. I think what that show has tapped into so effectively is, what is more Australian than the idea of like renovating your house and selling it to get a profit? Like, this is a country whose economy largely rests on like the pyramid scheme of ever growing house prices and like doing knockdown rebuilds or doing interior remodeling. That is so Australian. Like, we go to Bunnings instead of church now. We watch The Block to discuss property and renovations, and The Block has also increasingly become more of like a interior drama about the people on the show too. So they've sort of taken those tweaks from MAFS and made the block more of a thing. I think the other part of the reality TV recipe, unlike a lot of traditional Australian drama, it is pretty good at reflecting the diversity of the Australian population. I think dating shows have been the worst at it, but like you look at the first season of Australian Idol and like that still remains like one of the most culturally representative shows ever made in Australia. The block has like people on it that you see when you walk around Sydney and Melbourne, but you don't traditionally see on television. And I think that's been another reason why a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have traditionally watched Australian dramas are like, cool, this show is like got people that look like my cousins or my aunties and uncles. I'm going to sit down and watch it. Interestingly, one of the criticisms that MAFS had in the UK was that it was too white. Like people were like, this is... We didn't mention actually that we found out from our friend Rob Miranda wrote a piece about this. Emerald Fennell, the director of Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, is a fan of Australian MAFS, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, the fact that she was sitting there watching it, like, I think it was a particular season a couple of years ago that she was just, like, really, really into it. And to the point where she was, like, tweeting about it. And she was like, Cam and Jules forever. And, yeah, she was, like, fully invested in the storyline. I think she said that she did an interview with the New York Times and they asked her about it. And she was like, oh, because it was the perfect, like, thing for me to switch off when I was in, like, you know, Globe season or whatever it was.
Maybe that's what inspired all the cooked relationships in Saltburn.
Yeah.
But I will say, we were saying how reality TV might be bad for kind of other areas of cultural production in Australia. But I do also wonder if it is bad for us as audiences. Like if you span out, it really taps into the kind of micro attention economy that we are developing as consumers of media. You know, it's like the fast, quick cuts, the spikes of adrenaline with drama still. Like, it's kind of like, will we get to the point where we consume so much reality TV that we have rewired our brains to be unable to sit through an episode of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which has a fair amount of drama, without being like, gosh, this show goes for a long time or it's a bit slow. You know what I mean? I do genuinely worry that we are forgetting how to read and consume media that isn't like this, that doesn't kind of speak to that kind of need for a serotonin boost.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I popped into a friend's place over the weekend and he was there with a couple of people on the couch and they were just sort of slumped over watching TV. And I'm like, oh, what are you guys watching? And they're watching Below Deck, which is, you know, a reality show about the staff on like super yachts and stuff. And I'm like, oh, like you know, what's happening? Like, I don't know. It just is just like, they called it smooth brain television. You just have it on and you can be on your phone, texting, you know, seeing what's on Instagram. It is just sort of background noise. And I wonder whether that is also a huge part of reality TV. A show like Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Succession, you kind of have to be all in on that. Like if you're double screening, you're missing stuff, it's not going to work. But reality's there. You can make dinner, you can talk to your partner, you can have a phone call and just like have that running on in the background. I don't know if it'll rewire our brains, Mel, but I wonder if it changes audience expectations as to what entertainment and TV is and makes it harder and harder for shows that aren't structured in that way you're describing to succeed. I think we're already seeing that with the way that YouTube is influencing how TV and films are made. Like so many films, we've talked about this before, have that sort of hook in the first minute to get your attention and then the story plays out. That to me feels very inspired by the way that YouTube videos are designed to grab you very quickly before they tell you the rest of the story. And maybe that's good. Maybe like if people like this stuff, maybe TV should adapt from it. But I don't know, we're kind of purists at heart also. So I think, yeah, it's a good thing to be concerned about.
Yeah, and I think it does speak to what you mentioned earlier, something like you do see the influence of reality TV creep into other fields when in something like Nemesis, the ABC documentary, where it is kind of framed almost like you are watching a reality TV show, even though it's all factual, but it's the kind of fly-on-the-wall moments, it's the kind of quick cuts. It has changed that format remarkably, and all documentaries actually, really. You think about the ones that, what was the Australian one that was huge overseas about the town where one person died?
Larimer, Lost in Larimer.
Larimer was essentially a reality TV show of pieced together footage, or it was structured like that. So, yeah, I think that is an interesting development.
For all of this said, Mel, you're going to go and just keep mainlining MAFS for the rest of the season, aren't you?
But the worst thing is, like, we discussed this when we were both kind of getting into it. Like, I watched the first episode out of curiosity, but then I was very sucked into last year, and I know how much time it takes, like, out of your life, because it's on, like, I don't know, 8 nights a week or whatever. And so, like, this year we were like, oh, I won't, like, I'll just watch the first episode, but then, like, I won't commit myself because I want to be able to watch other stuff. And then here we are, like week 2. I haven't missed a single episode.
Yeah, it's like a huge time commitment, isn't it?
I know, and I'm already like the episode's on, and then I immediately go to like I go to So Dramatic, the Instagram page, to see like all the shit she's talking about them, and then I go and look up each person's Instagram page. Like it's just so like.
Don't shout out the So Dramatic Instagram page and podcast on our show, Thomas. That's outrageous.
Well, that's what I do.
Let's move on to our Impress Your Friends recommendation segment, where we pick something that we're enjoying watching, reading, listening to, consuming at the moment. My one it's a little bit of a basic recommendation, but I'm kind of surprised how few people in my life are watching it. And so I want to give it a really big plug. It is the 12th and allegedly final season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I say allegedly because Larry David has famously said that he's not going to make the show anymore and he's come back, but he's getting pretty old now. I think he's in his mid to late 70s. And it feels like, just the way that this show is structured and what it's building up to, that this is probably a farewell from our friend. If you're not familiar at all with Larry David, he is the co-creator of Seinfeld and the writer of the show for a very, very long time. And this show is based on his, like, I guess it's like a heightened version of the reality that he occupies living in Hollywood, and has a lot of famous people who pop up in it. It's the 12th season of the show, but it's actually been on air for 25 years. The first season debuted in like 2000. It's had a big hiatus. This is like the funniest show on TV, I think. Like it always is when it's on. This new season is amazing. Like the first episode has Larry traveling to Atlanta to attend a party for a quote-unquote black billionaire. So he brings his black housemate Leon. The black billionaire turns out to be a South African guy, not an African guy. And just chaos and drama ensues. And it's getting a little bit political now as well. I just feel like this is building to something that is going to maybe like almost Nathan Fielder, the Curse style, just have people saying, whoa, what the fuck did I just watch? It's on Binge. It's an HBO show. It's on Binge in Australia. Could not recommend this one more.
I'm so excited to watch this. I love all of Larry David, and I think Curb goes into kind of race, gender, all kinds of things in a daring but interesting way, holding them up for critique. I was interested, though, because a big point of Curb, or for the last few seasons, has been like the fatwa against Salman Rushdie, and Salman Rushdie has actually appeared in the show a few times. So I was wondering if the final season might dabble in that post what happened to Rushdie.
There is the theory doing the rounds that, because Larry, without giving too much away, he's sort of like going through a court process at the moment in the show. And the Seinfeld finale famously featured the return of basically every character they'd interacted with, giving evidence about how they're terrible people. I think it would be amazing if Larry just did that again. He's like, I don't know how to end the show. I came up with a great idea once. We're doing it, and it's Salman Rushdie. It's every single person who has appeared on the show, and they're just talking about how terrible a human being he is.
Well, I wondered about that, though, because obviously the Seinfeld finale was pretty polarizing in terms of whether or not people think it was a good finale. Lots of people don't. And, like, will they talk about that in the final season of Curb? Like, does he reference it a lot? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my one. Thomas, what have you got?
Yeah, I actually have a show in a similar vibe to Curb Your Enthusiasm. This is the Vince Staples show. It's actually out today on Netflix in Australia. And so, like, for those of you who don't know, like, let's say Mel, Vince Staples is a rapper.
Thank you.
He's a rapper, but he's always been kind of like, I guess more than that. He's very popular online. He's got this kind of like really relaxed.
I say he's not just a rapper. I mean, his album Big Fish Theory, I think, is one of the best rap albums of the past 10 years.
Yeah, but
really good.
But you know what I mean? He's kind of like a rap personality and creator, and he's almost like, he often talks about how he grew up loving TV and comedy like more than rap. And this show, it's almost like a blend of Curb and Bupkis, which I talked about, the other day, which is, Pete Davidson's version of a heightened version of himself. Entourage, maybe, and probably the one I would compare it most to is Atlanta. So it's basically like Vince Staples, like living his everyday life as a kind of rich, kind of famous, like kind of well-known rapper, in the game, and just kind of like the things that happen to him. But he's so funny, and he's kind of like so laid back. He's almost horizontal vibe. He's very funny to watch, and there are the usual kind of like celebrity cameos and stuff. Like Rick Ross pops up in it, but I just thought, it's got like this really particular tone to it that is very Curb-esque, and he's a bit of a talent, I think, Vince Staples, and someone that we should definitely keep an eye on. So yeah, that's my one. It's a Vince Staples show, and that's on Netflix today.
Sounds like it's got a bit of a Dave vibe, the show we keep like telling you to watch.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, it sounds great. I hadn't really paid heaps of attention to it, but I'm very hyped now. Mel, round us out. What have you got for impressing our friends?
Surely muster dogs. Surely it's got to be muster dogs.
Isolate your friends.
Well, I'm going to help you impress your friends with a book called Just Friends, which is by our colleague here. I've got a few. I've had a few moments of quite good stuff. Yeah. It's called Just Friends. It's by Gian Yankovic. She is our colleague here at The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. She's lifestyle editor. And
A wonderful colleague, a wonderful person in our professional lives.
All-time fun guy.
Yeah.
All-time fun gal.
Lunch pal. And it's just such a delicious read. It's so nice. It's all about friendships, the different types, the role they play in our lives, how we make friends, how we keep them. And, I thought one of the things I really liked, one of the chapters in this book looked at how, sometimes you think of friendship in a really narrow way, like the kind of deep and meaningful friend that you have the intense conversations with. But Gian makes the point that, all kinds of friendships hold value and are worthy. The person that you maybe only catch up with once a month can be just as important as the work friend who you have lunch with every day, as the long-time friend who you have those deep and meaningful conversations with. So it really did kind of make me think about friendship differently and kind of value all the friendships you have, and particularly you guys, of course.
Wow,
I love that.
It's very
great
nice.
plug. I think that the three of us are more than just friends, but maybe Gian would say that that's bad, and actually all kinds of friendships are equal, and we don't have to have different hierarchies for the way that we interact with one another. Anyway, that's a great recommendation. I'll deal with that with my therapist.
I have read the book and I loved it. It was, a very, very smart read. And I think friendship is one of those topics that is kind of in vogue and could have been handled in a particular way that was but this is great, and it's very smart. So yeah, great book, great recommendation.
Yeah, and we've definitely
From a
cemented
great
that
friend.
friendship. Yeah.
Guys, that was a great conversation about Sony Pictures' Madam Web. Thanks.
That would be a good night out for a few great friends.
Yeah,
Me, Sydney, and Dakota.
Thomas and Mel, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode of The Drop was produced by Margaret Gordon. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode of The Drop, make sure to follow us in your favourite podcast app, leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. I'm Osman Faruqi. See you next week.